Did you know about the ancient Yoruba art history? Wait a minute. This is Afroland Stories. We tell our stories around the fire, or sometimes under the baobab tree. African stories are powerful. Welcome. Today, we talk about the Yoruba art history. Part 1. As did other communities elsewhere in Africa, the Yoruba people migrated within and beyond West Africa. Today, the Yoruba are spread mostly in the southwest of Nigeria, living in states like Ekiti, Oyo, Ondo, and Lagos. They are also found in Kogi and Kwara states in north-central Nigeria. For the ancient Yoruba, and even the contemporary, Ife was the most significant cultural center. Where do we find Ife today? In Osun State. The Yoruba consider Ife a holy city and a birthplace for mankind. It is the oldest Yoruba city, founded in 500 BC. It became a thriving metropolis by the 11th century AD and a center of an influential city-state. Ife means a place of dispersion, or the navel of the world. The Yoruba believe the city was founded by Oduduwa and Obalata, the deities. Obalata created the first humans out of clay, and Oduduwa became the first divine king. The Yoruba had their version of the creation story. Yoruba, as a description, was first used by the British to reference the people of Oyo Kingdom, which at one time dominated southwestern Nigeria and southern Benin. This was because of similarities in language and culture among the groups in this region, descending from Ife. The Yoruba, as a people, are neighbored to the west by the Fon and their kinfolks, the Ewe and the Popo, present-day Togo and Benin Republic. Collectively, the Ewe and the Popo are known as the Aja. Tradition says the Aja kingdom dynasties originated in Tado, in today's Togo. Further, the myth goes, a Tado princess mated with a leopard spirit and birthed Ogasu, whose descendants founded the kingdoms of Adra and Dahomey, both part of the modern Benin Republic. Between the 12th to the 13th century, Tado was developed as a city. Adra was developed by the 16th century, and Dahomey by the 17th century. Let's now talk about early Ife. But how was life in ancient Ife? According to Yoruba mythology, as we have mentioned, the city of Ile-Ife is the navel of the world. The creation story happened here, and Yoruba descendancy began. The gods Oduduwa and Obatala descended from heaven to create earth and its inhabitants. And Oduduwa became the first ruler, Oni, of Ile-Ife. Even today, Yoruba kings trace ancestry to Oduduwa. Artistic and archaeological evidence show that the Yoruba culture of early Ile-Ife dates between AD 1000 and 1400, a period known as the Pavement Period. Prior to this, two other earlier periods exist, which are the Archaic period, up to 800 AD, and a pre-pavement period, circa 800 AD to 1000 AD. So what happened during the two earlier periods? From the earliest period, the Archaic period, we find several stone monoliths. The biggest of them is a granite gneiss known as Opa Orenmion, at a height of approximately 5.5 meters. It is figured with spiral-headed iron nails in a trident pattern. It is not known exactly what the monolith represented, but its name, Opa Orenmion, meaning the staff of Orenmion, is recent. Going by the Yoruba myth, Oduduwa's son, Orenmion, founded the dynasties of both the Kingdom of Benin and the Yoruba city-state of Oyo. In the subsequent period, the pre-pavement, we find artifacts that depict human and animal subjects, one of which is known today in Ile-Ife as Idena, the gatekeeper. The later period, the pavement period, then comes on in the 11th century, during which Ile-Ife grew into an important urban center. Rivalries with other city-states increased at the start of the 13th century, and Ile-Ife protected itself with defensive walls and moats. These periodic clashes with other city-states may have influenced Yoruba's culture of living in walled cities surrounded by farmlands. In the early Ile-Ife, the palace would be constructed in the center of the city, and the city itself would be enclosed by two concentric walls. Then shrines would be found near the palace and other sections of the city. It is obvious that the city's architecture was planned. Major roads radiated outward, linking Ile-Ife to neighboring cities. Marked by a large gateway that likely housed guards, each opening in the moat and wall complex was both a military post and a ritually consecrated space. The basic unit of architecture seems to have been a square or rectangular courtyard surrounded by a veranda. Most homes would have been formed of several such courtyards, while the palace probably had great numbers of them. At least one palace courtyard of great size accommodated a large portion of the population for ceremonies. The most important courtyards in palaces, shrines, and gateways were decorated with elaborate mosaic pavements of stone and pottery shards. Paved courtyards were sacred spaces, thus ritually buried pottery has been recovered from such courtyards. From one courtyard, 14 buried pots were found. They were fitted with lids depicting the heads of different animals. Likely, most of the art of ancient Ile-Ife was created for the royal court, including figures that may have been intended as portraits of rulers, officials, and their families. In this latter period, cast metal works were also produced, of bronzes, brass, and pure copper. How were the metals sourced? Through the Trans-Sahara trade networks that extended to Northwest Africa and other trade routes connecting Central Europe. These works were produced through the lost works process. How did the lost works process work? First of all, the lost works casting process, which is still in use today, was first used in the 4th millennium BC, in the Near East, early China. It was then propagated to other civilizations, including Kemet, the ancient Egypt. South of River Niger, lost wax casting was employed at a site in Egbo Uku, circa the 10th century AD. Here is how the process works. 1. A heat-resistant mass of clay is formed, approximating the shape of the sculpture to be. 2. This mass is then covered with a layer of wax, which the sculptor models, carves, and incisors. 3. Wax rods and a wax cap are attached to the base of the completed wax model to prepare it for casting. 4. A thin layer of finely ground liquid clay is painted on the wax model, and the entire assembly is then covered with increasingly thick layers of clay. 5. When the clay is completely dry, the assembly is heated to melt out the wax, leaving an empty image or mold of the sculpture for the molten metal to fill, and channels where the wax rods have been to allow the metal to be poured in. 6. The mold is turned upside down to receive the molten metal, which is generally a copper alloy approximating brass. 7. When the metal has cooled, the outer clay casing and inner clay core are broken up and removed, freeing the brass sculpture. 8. After the pouring channels are filed off, the image is ready for final polishing. And lastly, 9. A sculpture produced with this method is unique, for the mold is destroyed in the process. The most remarkable sculpture of this period was found in a shrine on the banks of the river Niger, near Toda. It was made of almost pure copper, circa 1300 AD. Oral histories from the Igala people report that this extraordinary piece, amongst a set of others, was sent from Ifa to Toda as a token of authority or stolen as a trophy of war. Copper is exceedingly difficult to cast, and the flawless casting of this mask is a tribute to the high level of technical skill attained by Ifa artists. The mask is said to represent Obelufon II, the third ruler of Ife, who is credited with introducing the techniques of casting. The work is kept on an altar in the palace of the present-day Oni of Ifa, where it is believed to have resided since its creation some 500 to 700 years ago. Let's now talk about early Owo. To the southeast of Ile-Ife lies the city of Owo, about 130 kilometers away. It was a powerful city-state with wide influence. Historical artifacts suggest that Owo was culturally tied to Ifa. Indeed, narrations from Owo claim that the kingdom was founded from Ifa, and that its first ruler, Oba or Olowo, was the youngest son of Oduduwa, the Ile-Ifa deity. A number of terracotta sculptures have been found here, dated to the early 15th century, which corresponds to the pavement period of Ifa art. Some of the Owo terracottas resemble those from Ifa, while others reflect the style of those from the Kingdom of Benin in the south. The early art in Owo deeply portrays the theme of sacrifice. In those arts, we see the depiction of animals, such as chicken offerings. Sacrifice was highly considered in the Yoruba religious practices, especially if the sacrifice brought prosperity and peace. We must note here that, even in other cultures across the world, as well as in religious mythologies, like the Christian mythology, sacrifice is highly regarded. If there was a greater price to be paid to appease the gods, the Yoruba would make a human sacrifice. Strangers or slaves would then be offered as sacrifice, as it was taboo to sacrifice a native person. From the artifacts, we find a terracotta sculpture depicting a basket of decapitated heads, who must have been strangers, sacrificed to the gods. We also find a close connection between the traditions of Owo and Benin. This must have been the case for centuries. Owo was a major center of ivory carving, and some Owo carvers worked in Benin. Stories of origin in Owo claim that the first Olowo, that is, paramount ruler, was both a son of Oduduwa, the deity, and also the brother of the ruler of Benin. The ivory carvers of Owo created the Udamalora sword, which is a prestigious ceremonial weapon made of ivory. It is still worn today by a paramount ruler, the Olowo, and other high-ranking leaders in important cultural festivals. Whoever wears the sword comes from a prominent family and is respected across the kingdom. An example of an important festival would be the Igogo, which reenacts the early life of an early queen of Owo. The Udamalora sword can be made of other materials like brass or iron, but the most prestigious material is ivory. Let's now look at another early Yoruba center, called Esie. From Yoruba's past, another center, the town of Esie, stands out. Why? The largest collection of stone figures to ever been found in West Africa was located in a sacred field outside the town of Esie. Unlike Ifa and Owo, which have been fairly understood by art scholars through archaeology and oral histories, Esie, and other details of Yoruba's past, have stayed unknown. The stone figures of Esie comprise over 1,000 pieces that lay on the aforementioned field, 100 kilometers to the north of Ile-Ifa. One of the stone figures is a big, sitting person, with hands on the knees, ornamented with necklaces and armlets. In height, the stone figures range from a few inches to several feet. The majority of the figures are of people, both female and male, with intricate hairstyles or headgear. Also, different facial types and scarification patterns are depicted. Many of the people figures are seated. Some play instruments, others bear weapons. Other figures depict animals. Where are the stone figures today? They are placed in a museum at the original site. The local people derive religious meaning from these stones. The stones are considered to be the owners of the community land, the overseers of community welfare, and providers of fertility. And a priest watches over them in the museum. As we share this African art corpus, we express our deepest gratitude to great art historians like Frank Willett, Peter Galek, Dennis Duaden, and Monica Visona, whose works have formed the foundation of this story. On other online sources, we also relied.